Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode Behind the Wealth. Please note that everything we say today in this podcast or audio message, it is as a general advice and not as a specific advice to your particular circumstances. The other day, I was going to catch a train to go to the city, and I realized there is a big noteboard that says mind your gap. And actually, there was a recording message that the railway stations put constantly, mind your gap. And I just looked down. I always knew that there is a gap and we have to be careful. But I realized there's only 25 or 30 centimeters gap between the platform and the train. But obviously, it must be so much importance for accidents and that happens in the different railway platforms that the authorities need to mention to all of us constantly, mind your gap. And the same applies to the financial gap. And you probably ask, what is a financial gap? The most usual definition we use as a financial gap is when people come to us at 50, maybe 55, even earlier, or a little bit later, and they say, look, I'm going to retire in 5 or 10, 15 years' time. Do I have enough for me to retire on that level of income, on that level of life expenses? And this is basically the start of any advice we do when we address issues like this. So, for example, to assess if I want to retire on, say, $50,000 a year, do I have enough to go through my retirement ages and my really 2 or 3 phases of retirement ages? The very immediate after I stop working, the one later on, probably 75 and onwards, and then the last one, which is the doom and gloom retirement phase, unfortunately, for all of us. Of course, financial gap can be also if we are a young couple, 30, 35, and we want to buy our dream home. Do we have enough to borrow and we can service enough? You can service easily that borrowing to buy that dream home, which say a house with 3, 4 bedrooms and big garage and swimming pool. Basically, financial gap is anything we want to do in the near future or the distant future, and we assess today if we are going to achieve that goal. And if you cannot achieve it in financial sense, of course, then this is considered financial gap. What is the value of knowing from now your financial gap? The value it's from now, the financial gap, is that if you are behind and you have a financial gap, then you can really address that issue as soon as possible to achieve the goal that you want to achieve. So if you want to retire on X amount of dollars, but you plan to retire in 5 years' time, maybe with a small variation, save a little bit more or spend a bit less or work an extra year, 2 years, or just go hard for the pay rise for the next 5 or 6 years to achieve that goal, which is going to be very beneficial for the next 10, 20, 30 years for their retirement, or to achieve your goal to buy your property, or you achieve your goal to go on business by yourself because you have the buffer of cash and reserves to go to business as a self-employed person. So the financial gap, it's a very important part of any really financial plan, because we address what is the perfect life for us, financially, for example, and then how we're going to address that if we are close to what we want to be in the next 3 or 5 or 10 years. And if there is any difference on that, then of course we need to address and we name it as a financial gap. How we deal with the financial gap? One of the issues to deal with the financial gap is, of course, how much time we have to deal with this financial gap. If I'm 62, 63, and I want to retire in 2 years' time, and I don't have enough, or 3 years' time, I don't have enough super, I don't have enough reserves, I don't have enough assets to sell for me to retire comfortable, I don't have a lot of time in front of me of a meaningful employment and to cover and close that gap. But if I'm say 45, I have a lot of more time in front of me, 20 years say, to close that gap and achieve what I wanted to achieve. So one thing is the time. The second part of the issue is how big is the gap. The smaller the gap it is, the bigger the easiest, of course, to achieve it, or the bigger the gap it is, we need to do more effort or take a little bit more risk on our investments and our strategy to achieve and close that gap. And of course, all this depends on your personal circumstances. The personal circumstances is, for example, if you are a young family and you want to achieve the dream home, but you still have two toddlers or two very young children, and the mother or or one half of the family is taking maternity leave or paternity leave to address this raising very young children, it's going to be a lot harder than if you say, for example, the children go to school and you don't need really to take time off work. The other relative issue is in the older ages when they want to achieve a comfortable retirement is the spending time. At 50, 55, usually we see people that start to spend a little bit more because they want to reward themselves more and more with buying a better car or going more holidays because now is the time to enjoy. Knowing the financial gap, this is really alter a little bit the result of this spending, because if you know that you don't have financial gap, of course, then it will be a lot easier to have from now your lifestyle you want. But if you know that the financial gap is too big, then maybe you consider this extra holiday or updating your car every 2 years or 3 years instead of every 5 years or 6 years or every 10 years. So knowing the financial gap, it makes you make a lot more educated guess, an educated decision, or it's probably, I would say, wrong, not educated, informed decision to achieve the result that you want to achieve in the near or the distant future. How we can help you identify that? We really can help you identify that because what we do usually, we verbalize and we note what is your goal. And then we put a value of that goal, inflation related, of course, adjusted. And then we project these numbers in the future to see on a normal circumstances of average circumstances of the last 10 years of growth of a portfolio or growth of the property you have or assets you have, and also particular circumstances around your particular needs. Say maybe you receive an inheritance in 5 or 10 years. Maybe you got a redundancy and this has changed everything in the calculation. We then project these numbers and we make a very, very good analysis of understanding how far we are or how big is your financial gap. So the value a financial planner adds to you for you to make a better informed decision, it is really to properly calculate your financial gap if you have enough for whatever goal you want to achieve in the near future. And usually, of course, is how much money I will have for me to retire comfortably. And this can be addressed anytime, really, probably after 30, 35 years old, to project if you're going to have enough money or give you an idea how much money is going to be your net assets, super and other assets, except your home, which is, we make always the assumption your home is going to be paid off at the time of the retirement. Not always, most of the time. And how much assets I have outside my paid off home for these funds to achieve what I want to do when I'm close to retirement or at the retirement stage. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to call us on 96007760 or email us pw@silverandyoung.com.au. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you have a question, we are a phone away. Have a good day. This is Dimitri from Sylvan Young Private Wealth.